If you were to kind of look back and think, man, okay, there was some things that I learned, a book I read or a course I went through, what would you say are the 2 or 3 most helpful things you've kind of learned or would suggest somebody, that have helped you over the years?
I would still say that the best thing was the 3 things that immediately come to my mind was having the mentors. Like, it can't be overstated. Jason Hewlett, without him, I probably wouldn't be a ship headliner. I mean, he took my craft and elevated it. And Jason used to be back in the day. He did ships along with some other stuff that he did, a lot of different things, Vegas resident, all that. But I think having somebody who is successful at what you're trying to do is definitely more powerful than any book. I mean, maybe they have a book and you can read that book, so that's a good start, right? But having them look at what you do and give you that specific feedback, for a lot of the type of field that I'm in, there aren't books really about it.
Okay, welcome today to Jason Lyle Black. He's a friend of mine that I think we've known each other for, well over 15 years, Jason. But for those of you who aren't familiar with him, he's a recovering accountant that is a piano player full-time now. But Jason he's been working on the cruise ships and that's kind of his main gig as of late, since COVID now, but he has got millions and millions of views of his YouTube videos. He's been on the Ellen DeGeneres Show. He's the only guy that I know that plays almost as well upside down or backwards on the piano as he does forward. I've yet to be able to master that skill, but just an incredible performer, comedian. Again, just a great guy, and he's got a ton of sheet music as well on the piano. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that. But Jason, welcome to the show, and want to just kind of hear a little bit about. I think people would love to hear your story. As we were just prepping for this interview, you were telling me about how you've kind of evolved, and now you'd never expected you'd be on the cruises full time. But give people a little bit of your background, where you came from, and origin story.
Yeah, I have played the piano for, 27 years now, 27, 28, something like that. And, in high school, my passion was always writing. It was composing. That was actually like my biggest thing that I loved. I put out my first album when I was 16 years old, and I was doing a lot of what I really enjoyed was taking songs and kind of juxtaposing them together in unexpected ways. And so creating medleys of different music, that was a big thing for me, and just kind of reinterpreting stuff in different styles. So as I got into my 20s and started getting on stage more, I also, of course, did the upside down backwards thing as you were talking about. I ended up connecting with John Schmidt back in, I guess this was 2004 or 5. No. Something like, about 2005, I think, who's now
pre-piano guys, right?
Pre-piano guys now of the world famous group, the Piano Guys, and of course, a longtime friend of yours as well. And John kind of took me under his wing a little bit, and I had a few opportunities to perform on stage with him as he kind of saw that I had that same sort of comedic flair and just sort of fun audience connection that he had. But that really helped to kind of whet my appetite between the things, the excitement with my friends of what I was doing as a creator. This is all pre-social media days, just, the stuff we would do in the band room at lunch as I would take these songs and put them together. And anyway, that kind of led to me, getting into playing for more things in my 20s, and just naturally ended up doing kind of a comedic shtick on stage at the piano. And then sort of that led me into eventually doing, I started doing like benefit concerts, that sort of thing, like a lot of people do. And then I was doing corporate events, playing on stage for corporate parties, not background music, but doing like a 20 to 45-minute program after awards dinners. And that really helped kind of hone my craft. Corporate audiences are tough. It's, I think, the toughest audience, hands down, you ever play for, because they're not there for you, and they're kind of like, who booked the pianist to perform for us? Like, that's just not what they would expect. But that really helps me to hone what I do, because you always get better when you play for a tough audience. You don't get better playing for an easy audience. That boosts your confidence, helps you feel good about yourself, and helps you stay in the game. But it's when you have the tough shows, as my buddy Jason Hewlett said, I mean, that's where you learn. That's where a great show is born. So yeah, all of that kind of led to me moving to Nashville eventually. I relocated from Utah to Nashville to try and really pursue touring more. I wanted to tour the country and felt like I had a show that really should be on the road and seen by more audiences. And sure enough, I moved to Nashville, was able to make those contacts and get into I did my first national U.S. tour in 2019 to 2020, right up to COVID. That was about 30 cities that I played in, concerts from Washington State to Florida, up and down California, Ohio, Indiana. Some were very small. Some were as big as 700 people. It really depended on kind of the local promoter, presenter, and what they had. And then around that same time, actually, it was a little bit earlier to that. About early 2018 was when I started working at Sea as a headliner. We're called guest entertainers officially. And yeah, I've worked with nearly a dozen cruise lines. I've worked with all of major cruise companies in the world, and with at least one of their brands, in the conglomerates that they have. And I love that industry. I love getting to be at sea. It's very appreciative audiences. They really love the shows on board. I get to work with musicians from all over the world. I have friends from dozens of countries. I've now been to dozens of countries. 20, I think I counted number 27 in my last trip was the Vatican City counted as number 27.
You've maxed out that passport now, right?
Yes, just got it renewed with the double-size passport now that is given to spies, airline pilots, and diplomats, and a few other heavy travelers like myself. So, I've got now 50 pages, so I can travel for the next, years all over.
So let's rewind a little bit. So you worked as an accountant for several years. So I mean, what I'm hearing is you've been doing the music for almost 20 years now of really kind of trying to make a career of that. But was music always the case, or what? People want to hear what, this was not an easy thing to get to.
Yeah, I think that I had, and we talked about this before kind of the interview, those ups and downs, and there was a lot of downs. In a way, I feel like there was more. Even after what were perceived to be the big breaks, I mean, the number of times that I nearly left the industry after already getting thousands of dollars on stage for a corporate gig, or getting, a record deal, publishing, I mean, all these different things that happened, there were still many times when it was just like, yeah, this just isn't going to work, because that's the unfortunate reality. I mean, in any business, it's so difficult in some respects to make a living in music. I think especially when, if people are tunnel visioned on only one opportunity of, I have to be, TikTok famous, or I have to be, this specific thing. And it's like, well, that may work, but there may be other opportunities that you'd be a better fit for. But yeah, to answer that question. So I did, when I was in school, I did study accounting. I never fit the mold of the piano major. I was too much of a comedic shtick guy. I was too much of I was always more passionate about the creative side of music than the technical side growing up. I was very good technically, but what I spent hours a day doing wasn't practicing Chopin, even though I love Chopin. I spent hours a day writing. So that's where, when you look at, because people used to ask me, how much do you practice a day? And in my head, I was like, but I only practiced the piano like 45 minutes a day in high school. Like, how did I end up where I am? And then one day I woke up and I was like, wait a minute, that was my practice for my lessons. But I spent hours a day, hours outside of that writing. That's all I did was write in high school. So I'd get home from school and I would spend hours at the piano composing. And then, I'd do my 45 minutes of, the Chopin and Rachmaninoff and stuff I was doing with my teacher. So I really did hone that craft over years. And, I had mentors and role models in high school, even before I connected with, John Schmidt, as I mentioned. Before that, there were other people I'd worked with locally when I grew up in California. But anyway, to get back to your question, accounting. So I majored in accounting. I'd never intended to major in music. And I don't know, if I look back on it, it's like, should I have, seeing where I am now? I mean, I don't know. I'm 35. So it's like, it's easy to look back, but it's like, would you have ended up in the same place if you took a different path? I mean, I don't know. I worked for KPMG, one of the big four accounting firms, and honestly, it helped me to see that corporate America was not for me long term. I mean, I enjoyed it. I was good at what I did at the firm. I was an auditor. I loved the people I worked with. That was the best part. Amazing people I worked with in that company. But the stress of it was a lot of hours, and at the end of the day, it was like, I'll tell you probably the important thing to share in this context. You work a lot of hours in the big four, and you get home at 9 o'clock at night or whatever, and you're doing your thing. And what I wanted to do when I had free time was music. It wasn't, going out like people would sometimes, let's go out to lunch, for a long lunch break. And it's like, I want to get home so I can work on the piano. I don't want to have a long, lunch break. And that was kind of one of the things that pushed me over the edge when I realized that we did all these late nights and all this overtime, but I had, a month off in the summer. And what was I doing with all of my time off? I was just recording music. It's like, maybe if I'm doing that with all of my vacation, my PTO, maybe this should be my job. Because if that's what I'm always doing on the weekends and at night, and I'm wanting to get home from work as fast as I can to work on this. So yeah, in 2015, I'd had my first promotion. I'd done one busy season as a senior auditor, and I just decided to make the jump. And I remember my favorite actor still of all time is Peter Falk, who played Columbo in the 70s. And Peter Falk, I read his biography. He quit his day job at 27 to be an actor, and ended up, becoming one of the most famous or iconic TV characters. And as Columbo, he was about 40, I think, when he got that role. But so that was kind of something, it's nice to have those stories of people that made that career shift. And he was also, I think, an accountant or something like that before he left. But yeah, I mean, there's other Steve Carell. I mean, it was a long time before his career kind of really took off for him, with The Office. I think it was like 40 or something when he got that role. So sometimes it takes
some time. So if you could go back, let's just say if you could rewind the clock back to 20 or even 25 years ago or so, and you could go back and give yourself advice, and hey, this is what you should do to end up with a music career and what to expect. What advice would you have for yourself?
There's one very specific thing that I wish I had understood when I was younger, and that is the importance of feedback from people who are successful in what you're trying to do. And that's something I did not seek out in all the ways I wish I had, specifically in YouTube. So I look back and I kind of came of age at a time when there was a lot of opportunity on YouTube. And I mean, there is still technically, but it's much more saturated than, it's ever been. Right. And I was at, Brigham Young at the same time that Lindsey Sterling was there. And when she was also kind of becoming established as a star, and of course, it's on a kind of different order of magnitude, notoriety, but that was at that same time, like she had been on America's Got Talent, within a year of when I was on the Ellen Show. And I wish that I had reached out, whether it was to her or even if, I think maybe one time I tried to email her agent, and by that time she's too big, I never heard back because I had mutual friends with her, but other people, and gotten kind of that, maybe hired a coach and said, hey, I'm trying to get, viral YouTube videos, because now I look back and I can see, like, if you look at the production quality of my videos now with YouTube, it dwarfs what I used to do as far as just, my home videos when I'm just doing a quick thing in the studio for YouTube. And all the technology I use was available 12 years ago to do what I do. You hit a little simple fog machine. I've got a really cool Hollywood grade light that looks like a lightsaber on the piano. I've got, a nice high-end but decent lens for filming the videos, all this stuff. It's like I could have been doing that in 2009. And all I would have taken was somebody to look at my videos and say, hey, look, you're really talented at the piano, but your production quality of your videos is really lacking. And, maybe you should figure out how to reach that market a little bit more directly. And that's eventually what I did in my stage show. So that's where Jason Hewlett, who I've probably mentioned him again. Jason was a huge impact on me personally as a coach with my show. And we would sit there and watch my videos together, and he would laugh and say, yeah, this is, or like now when I'm talking videos, I mean my live shows. And he would have run into all the same challenges I ran into on stage. And this is what you need to do. This is how we're going to tweak this bit. The way you introduce this, we're going to change it. The way you walked on stage, the way you bowed, the way you're dressed. I mean, all those things, the way you engage with the audience, your posture. I mean, there's so much that you can craft on stage to make yourself more appealing that's obviously my primary thing as a stage performer now. And yeah, so I wish I had been willing to go out and have people say, you know what, you can do this better, because it just I would have accelerated a lot faster if I had been willing to do that. And, I think I was maybe just a little too afraid, too sensitive. I didn't want people to tell me, you know what, this video isn't really working. And I just think, gosh, yeah, I could have probably, I had my first viral videos in 2015. And by that time, I did hire other people to help, So when I had my Frozen video that went really viral, I had Eric Thane, who is a really seasoned viral video producer, working with me on that. And on my Up video, I had one of his videographers, Dane Christensen, that shot it. I was working with Ben Arkell, who is the father of the girl that I did the video with. And he was kind of like you, was kind of like one of those people that can think a lot about marketing and audiences and entrepreneurship. And he kind of understood how to. So anyway, I wish I had done some of that earlier. I think, the musical talent's been there all along. It was just understanding how do you really target it,
utilize it.
Yeah. And not being afraid, to be turned down, I don't know.
Well, and we talked a little bit about, I know you've kind of dabbled in a lot of different areas. I mean, you talked about John Schmidt and kind of coming up thinking, okay, I'll be like the John Schmidt show. And, as you look back on your career and kind of the journey that you've been on, what advice do you have for people that are thinking, okay, I want to be just this? Do they need to be open-minded? Do they need to, I mean, what advice do you have there for somebody that's kind of thinking, oh, I'm going to be a classical pianist, or I'm going to be, a rock star? What advice do you have for those people?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is people have to be flexible with where you're going to end up. I think when I look at the people who I see that are really successful in a career in the arts, I feel like, or on stage or as a creative, to kind of broaden that. I think a lot of times people don't end up doing what they started out doing. And I don't know if I can give, maybe a ton of examples of that off the top of my head, but I think about my friend Rob Landis, who is a huge YouTuber now, and I talked to him in some time, but I mean, the guy's got millions of followers on YouTube and just is enormous. He went and got a master's degree in classical performance. That was his background, was as a to be like a symphony player. And he does the opposite of that now. I mean, he makes, videos of surprising people in chat rooms with, kind of meme violin content. It's so different than what he sort of expected, I think, to be doing, but he's been extraordinarily successful because he just went and was willing to kind of adapt to that. And I think, to your point, I really sort of set out as I'm going to be this, John Schmidt kind of goofy, fun, family audience guy at the piano. And when I moved out of Utah, I mean, that just wasn't really relevant the same. And even by the time I was coming up, it didn't have the same relevance as when he did it. And that's probably in part because he had kind of already become that guy. And so now I was just sort of like, another version of him. And it didn't really have the same draw to people when you're kind of, too much of an imitator, if you will. And whereas now what's become my sort of shtick is to not only the medleys that I do, and that's, my books with Hal Leonard and my viral videos are the medleys, but also on stage, my new show that's in development for the 23 to 24 season, or basically the way it's being branded, is 100 hits of stage and screen. And so that's the new trademark brand that I've developed to describe the show, because that's what I do. I go through as fast-paced, like, medley of Brahms, Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, all these different really iconic melodies that you don't have to be a classical, even a musician, to recognize them. They're all in movies. They're all really famous. And I moved through them very, very quickly with these really cool arrangements I've done that use, the whole band on the cruise stage. And when I go out solo, I have the tracks and the video screens and all this stuff. But that's now become kind of my thing. So I've actually moved away a bit from the comedic shtick and, the behind the back and upside down stuff that I do. I actually don't do that near as often anymore. I do a tiny little bit of it in my first show on a cruise ship, just for fun for those audiences. But that's not at all now what my main thing is. The thing that people know me for is it's this high intensity, really unique show taking you through all these songs. I do these Broadway medleys, this, movie medleys. And again, you can go to the music store and you can buy my Christmas medleys, my Disney medleys, all this other stuff. Medleys is kind of my thing. And, and then, and I found some of my own stuff. I wear funny socks on stage now, and the cruise audiences love that. I have this blue tuxedo, custom tux, and then I've got all these funky socks, and, the 75-year-old grandmas in my audience, they love it. They love that stuff. And it's endearing. And so I think a lot of it is, one of the main messages is staying true to yourself and kind of finding yourself, learn from other people, but develop your own voice. And that for me was kind of how I found, my way. And then being flexible, because again, my first cruise shows were much more focused on playing upside down and that sort of a thing. And now I'm much more focused on, I'm going to recreate Beethoven for you in a really fun, current way that you've never heard before, using rock musicians and going through all these different hits of Beethoven. And that's become what nobody else in the cruise industry is doing. I haven't seen a single show that closes with this Beethoven like I do. And that's a new thing actually in 2022, that I now close my show with this big Beethoven symphony medley. And it's awesome. And like I said, nobody's doing that on a cruise. Well,
I'm sure the bands love playing something unique like that with you on the ship. Something a little different than the Billy Joel and Elton John type of stuff. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Just trying to think of, so you've been able to crack the cruise lines. I know I've talked to a lot of artists over the years that's definitely been a challenge, and they've struggled with that. And how did that come about for you? And is the cruise industry something that musicians should have on their radar if they want to be performers? I mean, if you go back and just give yourself advice on the cruise line, and hitting it in that world, what would you tell people?
Yeah, in a way, I'm almost glad I didn't really know it existed, because I think I would have been so terrified of needing to make it in that, that like I just would have been too nervous. Do you know how like sometimes, you go into a meeting, you don't realize how big that client pitch or something, or the person that's going to hear your music, you don't realize how influential that's going to be, or the first date that ends up being your spouse or something. Like you just don't want to know, because that would make you too nervous for it. When I started into the cruise industry, that was kind of like a side thing. I mean, I was really a corporate entertainer, and I had clients across the country. I had gone to, I think, Washington State Healthcare Association. I'd spoken and performed for them. I'd gone to the Wisconsin Credit Union League as a national credit union group. And I mean, I was doing work. I playing across the country already. And I mean, I was having to work hard to find that work and to pitch myself. And, I was kind of my own agent. But the cruising was just kind of like more like icing on the cake. And I got connected with a management group in Nashville that pitched me to the cruise agency. And that, fortunately, the agent was very interested. But yeah, I mean, when I started, it was kind of just like a casual thing. And then I just fell in love with it. And that was the thing. I remember talking to other artists, and it's like, there is a pretty big difference, with a cruise gig as a headliner. You go and you get on board and you do your show, and then you wait. And you're there for like 7 days, and then you fly home. And that's the case with any cruise line. That's just the way the industry works, because it has something to do with just the ability of how to get people in and out of ports. It has to do with the entertainment programming on board, that they may say, okay, we want you to do both of your shows on board because you have 2 shows that you offer, but we want them, 4 days apart, so that the guests get to see you one day, and then we have the comedian and we have this other thing and we bring you back. So it's just the way the industry works. But what that means is that, unlike other gigs where you might fly in as, say, a corporate speaker, or as a band, you drive in, you play your show, you come home. With a cruise, you go play your show, and then you're there for another 5 days, and you play again, and you come home, or you go to another ship. So it's a very unique life, is I guess what I'm saying. And not everybody is willing to do that, or not everybody wants to do that, or would enjoy that. Whereas for me, I loved it. And one of the things in those off days is you're just sort of there as an ambassador to the guests. And so it's very common, especially on the smaller ships, where they a lot of people, maybe on some of the big ships, there's so much being offered at any one time that not everybody sees you. Whereas I've been on the real small, like high luxury ships as well. And, 70% of the ship watched your show. So when you're walking around, you're out at the pool, or you're out, jogging around the track, or you're in the gym, people are going to start talking to you. Oh my gosh, you were the piano player. I loved your show. So you're kind of a celebrity that whole week. And I loved that. And I would go play trivia with the guests. I would go host dinners, even when I wasn't asked to. Like, I would go above and beyond what the cruise lines expected, and go in and just, I really wanted to be part of the guest experience, because I loved that. I discovered that I love the hospitality industry. So all of that is to say, I think for me, cruising was a uniquely like that perfect fit, because it was like, I just love being here, whereas maybe some entertainers like, oh, I want to go home or whatever. It's like, this is just so much fun. I get to engage with all my fans after the show. And I mean, many times I'll be practicing. This was just a couple months ago, and somebody come up to me while I'm practicing. We'll end up talking for an hour and a half. I don't even get any more practicing done. You got to run and grab your breakfast and go meet the cruise director or whatever. But there's a certain type of people that work at sea, and you need to have that graciousness. You need to be fine with being on all the time when you step out of your cabin, that, you're a representative of the brand. And these are the highest end, hospitality brands at sea, in the world. I mean, really, it's
right.
The same level as any of the fanciest hotels in Dubai. I mean, some of these luxury lines that I've been on, it's like, I had one room, I was 400 square feet, was a luxury suite, which is enormous. But as a headliner, I mean, obviously I'm not always in a 400 square foot suite, but this particular line. Anyway, I'm digressing. But yeah, I mean, to people, somebody who's interested in the cruise industry, the thing that's really cool about it, it's one of the few things I know of in the world where strictly off of the excellence of your show, you can have a career for life on stage, or the excellence of your craft. Like, there are certain roles. Obviously, as a headliner, you have to have some sort of notoriety to get booked as a headliner. They're not going to take you just because you're interesting on stage. And in my case, that was the YouTube, the virality, the millions of views. It was the national corporate career that I was already doing, the touring that I had. So all of that fed into the background for me to get booked as a headliner. A lot of magicians were Vegas resident magicians somewhere. A lot of people did Broadway touring shows. I mean, everybody comes from somewhere. But even if that's not, if you don't have that kind of a maybe notoriety background or not yet, there are other roles on the ship that don't require that. Where like, the lounge musicians is an audition role. So you can audition with an agency and say, hey, I can play, 250 songs and sing all these Beatles hits, and you can land a gig on a cruise ship doing that. And or as a piano bar entertainer or in a cruise band or something. So there's a lot of opportunities, or a cast member for singers out of New York, and singers and dancers can become cast members. And that often feeds into headliners, people that used to be in production cast on a ship or sometimes used to headline like a lounge band can end up becoming a headliner on the main stage. So where else do you get to go and play? I mean, the kinds of venues I've played, like Celebrity's flagship, the Beyond, I was just there in July. They had 160 light fixtures in the venue that were the rotating. We're talking, I don't know, $20,000 light fixture or something. I have never seen a theater on land with that kind of staging. Never. 160, not 160 lights, 160 of the spinning, programmable, lights. Millions of dollars in light fixtures just in the theater. And it's like, you've got to be Simon Cowell to have that as your office. Where you're in the America's Got Talent stage. Like the staging that they have, these massive LED walls that you can bring the staging elements. So it's just, for me, wanting to be a creative with the stage, it's just unreal. I get to play with the best musicians from South America and from Ukraine and all across Europe in my bands. I love it.
That sounds amazing. Yeah. But so if somebody's wanting to get into that industry, the key is, you got to be an expert. You've got to have, hustled and made it at least to some level. And then is the doorway to the cruise lines. It's getting an agent and getting an agent that's excited about whatever your act is, correct?
Yeah. And there's timing, because sometimes you might have like say you got a female singer that just finished a Broadway tour of Aida or something in Europe or whatever, and wants to come and start working ships as a headliner. You may reach out to one of the agents and they may say, you're fabulous, but we have so many female vocalists right now that we don't have space to book anymore. Because, for example, if I'm the booker for Celebrity or, Holland America or something, I'm not going to put two of the same thing on in one cruise. I'm not going to bring on, a female vocalist and another female vocalist a different night. That's the same type of entertainment. And they really want a diverse offering. They want magic. They want the comedian. They want the male vocal, the female vocal, the ensembles of the piano, whatever. So some of it is the timing and finding the right agent. But yeah, every job except for the headliners has a formal audition process. So you can audition to be part of any of the kinds of, all these companies that produce the shows at sea. They have casting calls in New York or in Miami or in Berlin. all around the world sometimes. And then with the headliners, a lot of it is, you send in your stuff to one of the agencies and maybe you hear back and maybe you don't. If you know a headliner, obviously you can talk to them. But like me, I will say, it's one of those things. I can tell somebody, if I watch somebody's video, I can tell you if it's going to work at sea, because I've been at sea for hundreds of nights now. I don't know how many, but I think 300 nights or something on board a ship. Like I said, across about a dozen different companies I've worked for. So I know what they book and I know how the guests react to different things. And so I could tell you right away, looking at somebody's video, and that's me even just being 4 years into the industry, having a good sense for it. So if agents, it's one of those things where, that's why I think it's good to have coaching, because if you want to get into that, or you want to be a cruise headliner, you don't just say, well, I think I should be a cruise headliner and here's my stuff and I got to get the right agent now. It's like, well, you got to find out if you're ready. Is what you're doing on stage the kind of thing that's going to work at sea? Because sometimes people think, oh, I'm going to go do this. And it's like, they don't book that, or they book that, but people don't really like that. So it may not get good ratings and you may not get rebooked. And that is one thing I will say about the cruise industry. And my agent made this very clear to me when I started. You get one shot and that's it. It's one of the only things in music industry where you get only one shot, because if you go out And it's not, this isn't a criticism. This is just the actual way it works. If you go out and they put you up and your ratings come back low, they're not going to rebook you. They have 2,000 acts they can book. I mean, there are thousands of us that work at sea as headliners. And so they just won't bring you back. If you have good reviews, you can work for years. So there's nothing really like that, because in touring, if you have a bad show, you just don't play that venue again. But there's 1,000 other venues. There are 3 main cruise companies in the world. So Norwegian, Carnival, and Royal Caribbean Group. And yeah, they have a couple different bookers at each one, but it's basically 3 companies and about, a dozen or so brands out of that cater to Americans, and then a few that cater to Australians and, Europeans and stuff. But it's so, yeah, I mean,
it's an interesting industry for sure.
You gotta not mess up is sort of.
You always got to be on your game. So I know with a lot of the guests that I talked to on the show, education and learning really comes up as an important thing that people have done course. And it seems like everybody's selling some course. And I told you earlier, I don't sell any course at all at the moment. But if you were to kind of look back and think, man, okay, there was some things that I learned, a book I read or a course I went through, what would you say are the 2 or 3 most helpful things you've kind of learned or would suggest somebody, that have helped you over the years?
I would still say that the best thing was the 3 things that immediately come to my mind was having the mentors. Like, it can't be overstated. Mm-hmm. Jason Hewlett, without him, I probably wouldn't be a ship headliner. I mean, he took my craft and elevated it. And Jason used to be back in the day, he did ships along with, some other stuff that he did, a lot of different things, Vegas resident, all that. But I think having somebody who is successful at what you're trying to do is definitely more powerful than any book. I mean, maybe they have a book and you can read that book, so that's a good start, right? But having them look at what you do and give you that specific feedback, for a lot of the type of field that I'm in, there aren't books really about it. I mean, I've read 1 or 2 books that people have written about how to have a good cabaret show, or like, how do you interact with an audience? But really, it's like, you just kind of have to do it and then get the feedback. And so the second thing I was going to say was just doing it. So the best thing that I learned, I used to film, and it's funny, I forget about this because now I'm at a place where I don't have to do this anymore. But for the first quite a few years that I was on stage, I filmed every single show. And after every show, I would record like a half hour as I was driving home, and I would be critiquing what went well and saying, well, this bit seemed to work, this bit didn't work. I would go out sometimes to get an Airbnb for a weekend, and I would just like lock myself inside the house and just think about the show. And I would write down index cards with the different bits I was doing on stage and like what's working, and build off what is working or what's not. And when I toured early on, as people were leaving the theater, I would ask them, so, I loved your show. What did you like? What was your favorite part? And I would ask everybody that. And I actually have people that notice I have my little phone sitting there recording what they would say, so that I would know and I could go back and review all their comments after. And if something never got brought up by anybody leaving my show, it got cut. So that was the thing. The same mindset as these companies, like a Goldman Sachs or something, that's like, if you don't reach this level, of performance, we're just going to trim that. That was the same mindset I had with the show. So if something never got, brought up as I loved that bit, it was out. And then I would take the things that were working really well, and I would add a new thing like that, and I would try it. And so it gradually got to the point where now if I ask people that question, they can't ever think of anything, which is good, because the thing is, the whole show is at that level to where nothing sort of stands out above everything else, because everything now was standout.
It was really good.
But it's taken years to get there, and it's taken tons of work and feedback. And again, I mean, now I'm now working on new shows and, building. So I'll be repeating that process with some of the new programming I'm writing. But yeah, it's so that I think, again, I think getting that mentoring and then going and watching people. Like I remember going to Kurt Bester, definitely a phenomenal performer and creator. And I remember going to his show, and I sat in the back at the Eccles Center, wherever it was, and I had a notepad. And these people sitting next to me were like, yeah, what are you doing? Like at intermission, I took like 10 pages of notes, handwritten notes, scribbled the entire show, every single thing he did. It was like, how did he walk on stage? How often did he get up from the piano or sit down at the piano? What did he say? What got the audience to laugh? What did I like? Was there an idea I had that he didn't do? Something I thought. I did the same with Donnie and Marie Osmond when they were at the Sandy Amphitheater. I went and watched them. I did the same with Ben Folds when I saw him at the Ryman here in Nashville. I mean, I would do that. I went to Elton John. I did the same thing. I made notes, Elton John at Bridgestone Arena. And so that, I think, was, when you're seeing somebody who people will pay, $100,000 in ticket sales or $1 million in ticket sales a night, or even just, $10,000 or $15,000. And you see that and you're studying, what are they doing on stage? And actually when I went to see Don, and not to sound super vain, but when I went to see Donnie and Marie and I watched the way that Donnie interacted with the audience, and it was like, that is what I do on stage. I was like, there's nothing Donnie's doing that I don't do. And that was one of the reasons I was like, I've got to get in with these agencies. And that's why I moved to Nashville. Cause like, I know I have that connection with the audience. And sure enough, I moved to Nashville. Those agents saw that, and that kind of opened those doors. But, by the time I was going, I think Donnie and Marie was one of the last shows I saw before I moved out here. So it's,
well, what I'm hearing though is you've, a lot of times people think, even though you think about college, I get my music degree or whatever the degree is, and you think, I know everything now. And people just stop oftentimes with their education and they're like, okay, now I'll go get my job and work. But what I'm hearing from you is like, you were continuing, you elevated your education. You were trying to learn. And I really think, as I talk to multiple people who have achieved some level of success in whatever their career is they've continued to be a student. They've continued to invest. I mean, you're talking about investing in mentors and coaches. You're geeking out at a concert it's like an education, like, I'm going to go do this. My wife gives me a hard time because I listen to music books I'll listen to music a ton, but I'll listen to audiobooks and podcasts. I'm always trying to learn and just think, okay, what's the thing that I can do to get a little bit better? It's almost like a video game. You want to level up to, you're not happy with level 50. You want to get to, how do I get to level 1,000 and, 1,050, that nobody in their right mind is going to go to that level. And it definitely pays off. I have to give you, I know we're about out of time here, but I have to give you some props. So you're one of the few piano artists that I have a little bit of jealousy because my wife loves your piano hymn book. She will play out of that over my books. And I have this like little jealousy thing going on, like, oh my gosh, it's his book again. I have to listen to that song again. so one of these days I will be as cool as you are at writing piano sheet music, Jason. But that is
too funny, man. Well, I hope I figure out how to sell sheet music like you did. My Disney book does sell like that, but obviously that's Disney's. We talked about, Disney has the copyrights on that, but it's been great. I mean, it's put me on the map, and it's so cool to have a product on Amazon that's hundreds of 5-star reviews. That's my name, and I mean it. Yeah, I really like what you said though. I mean, always being a student, and I think sometimes I probably don't realize how unique it is to really, make it, if you want to use that phrasing, at sea, because it is true that, people sometimes go work at sea and then there's just, it's not everybody that ends up working full time or having maybe that volume as a headliner. But one of the things that I remember about my first 2 years was all I ever thought about on board the ship was my show. And I mean, that was OCD, 100% obsessive compulsive, but that's all I could ever think about. And so after every show, I mean, the next couple of days, I was just sitting there and again, I'd have the video or I'd have the recordings and I'd be talking to the other headliners who were generally quite a bit older than I was and had a lot, more experience, and say, what did I do well? What should I change? And I mean, my show went through so many iterations at sea already because I was just never content unless it was constantly, and sometimes it was hard because I'd show up on the ship and they're like, hey, do you have your set list? And I was like, your cue sheet for us? And I was like, I don't know, because I just changed it. Like the first 3 years I never did the same show, two ships in a row. Every time I'd leave it was like,
you change it up.
Let me tweak that. I think that would work a little bit better this way if we just cut that bit or added this one little bit or intro. And I would constantly be trying stuff. But that's how you do it. And so
that's how you get better. No, that's
I mean, that's you funnels, right? You didn't start your first day and have a funnel that got you to Comma Club.
No, we've failed so many times and do so many A/B tests that it's makes your head spin. Well, Jason, we're about out of time here now, but if people want to go learn more about your work, you have some phenomenal sheet music, so you don't have to necessarily go on a cruise to hear Jason. He's got awesome videos. He's got the sheet music. Where do you want him to go find out more about you?
Yeah, you can. So I have a lot of my sheet music with Hal Leonard that's in music stores. You can get on Amazon, my Christmas book, my Disney book, my first book of pop hits. Also now I got a lot of stuff with music notes. So if you go to musicnotes.com, you can see, you can actually download all my Disney stuff there too. You can get all my video game music I do now. My YouTube channel, Jason Lyle Black, has a lot of my current kind of my passion projects, the stuff I do on YouTube for fun now. And then my website, I do still tour. I won't be doing a US tour again until later 23, I think, but I am in talks with another agency about doing that. And so there is, always the occasional chance to see me there. And then of course, I do still do corporate events in between when I'm, flying to Istanbul or Argentina or wherever I'm going in the world. I do play, still some of these conferences and things like that. But yeah, awesome. It's been a treat to be on and chat with you. That's
awesome. If you ever get out to Utah again, I've got a recording studio out back, and we'd definitely love to have you come do a little house concert here. So,
I would love to. I still want to learn more about that, the world you have cracked and how you've mastered that. I think that's amazing.
Awesome. Well, Jason, thanks so much for your time. You've dropped some huge value bombs. I hope it's helped some people. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Jason here, and I hope you've gotten a lot of value out of this episode. Be sure to check out our show notes to learn more about our guest today, and if you'd like to support our podcast, there's a few things that you can do to help us grow. First, if you hit subscribe, it will help ensure that you don't miss a future episode. Second, if you'll share it with your friends on social media or send it via email or message, it helps us spread the word as well. And third, if you leave an honest review, it really helps with the algorithms so that other people can find our podcast. Finding success and fulfillment in the music industry is possible, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode.